This woman placed 3 tractors at the entrance to my farm to try to force me to follow the HOA rules. The day began like any other. The sun was rising over the horizon, tinging the sky with orange hues. The smell of wet earth hung in the air, and the distant noise of horses in the pasture indicated that they were already waiting for food. Everything seemed peaceful, until I reached the entrance to my farm. It was there that my peaceful morning turned into a nightmare. 3 tractors were parked side by side, completely blocking the entrance gate. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't chance. Someone had deliberately placed those machines there to prevent me from passing through. I stopped the truck abruptly, the engine still rumbling as I tried to process what I was seeing. For a second, I thought maybe it was some kind of city hall maintenance, some county project. But then, my eyes landed on the figure standing next to the tractors. Her, arms crossed, a satisfied smile on her lips, the typical air of superiority that this woman carried wherever she went. She seemed to be waiting for me, as if this moment had been planned for a long time. My breathing became heavy. I knew she was crazy, but that was on another level. This woman had been giving me hell for months. Ever since she took over as president of the HOA, she had tried everything to force me to obey her idiotic rules. First came the fines. Your barn doesn't meet the community's aesthetic standards. Your farm machinery may not be exposed to the view of other residents. Your cattle have exceeded the limits allowed by the HOA. She treated my farm as if it were a backyard in a gated community, as if I had to ask permission to take care of my own land. But I never paid any fines. I never bowed my head. And, above all, I never recognized her slightest authority over my property. Apparently, my resistance finally made this woman lose her patience. I got out of the truck, slammed the door, and walked over to her, each step echoing the anger in my chest. She didn't move. She didn't back down. "Have you gone mad?" I asked, pointing at the tractors. She smiled, as if she was enjoying the situation. "I'm just making sure you learn to respect the rules of the community." I crossed my arms, analyzing the situation. The woman really thought she had some kind of power over me. "Do you think you can stop me from entering my own farm?" She laughed. "You can. You just have to commit to following the HOA's rules and pay the outstanding fines." I took a deep breath, trying to contain the urge to explode right then and there. This woman thought she had me cornered. She thought she could bend me over with exhaustion. But what she didn't know was that she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. She thought she was blocking me, but in fact, she had just locked herself in the cage with me. I stared at her for a few seconds, my anger now turning into something much more dangerous. Pure contempt. This woman had no idea who she was dealing with. She had blocked my farm. Now I was going to end her life. I could have called the police right there. I could have filed a complaint for illegal obstruction of private property. I could have demanded that the tractors be removed immediately. But that would have been too easy. This woman didn't deserve a quick solution. She deserved to be destroyed in the same way she tried to destroy me. She continued to stand there, a smug smile on her face, as if she believed she had finally beaten me, as if I was about to give in, throw my hands up, and accept her rules. Poor thing. I took a deep breath, crossed my arms, and looked straight into her eyes. "You blocked the entrance to my farm with 3 tractors." "Exactly," she replied, still thinking she was in control of the situation. "And I won't move them until you comply with the HOA's demands." I let the silence hang for a moment, savoring her arrogance. Then I finally dropped the bomb. "You know that all this land, it's not just my farm, right?" Her smile faltered. She blinked. "What?" I took a step forward, gesturing to the field around us. "This whole county, the road you're standing on now, the HOA headquarters, it's all under my jurisdiction." Her face began to lose color. That's impossible," I laughed. "Is it? Then let me tell you a story. The HOA, that same association she led with an iron fist, didn't exist before my family sold some of the land for residential development. They created a private community within my county, But the real power never left me. I had influence in the city council. I knew every rule, every clause in the contracts, every legal loophole she had no idea existed. "Do you think you can surround me with these tractors?" I continued, crossing my arms. "But I can close all the roads in the HOA, cut off community services. I can turn your precious association into a pile of useless paper." Her gaze wavered. She tried to open her mouth, but this time there was no argument that would save her. "You're bluffing," she whispered, almost out of breath. I picked up my cell phone and opened an email. "Well, I've already sent the documentation to the town hall. So, if you think I'm joking, just wait." I knew that, at that very moment, my application was being analyzed by the county administrators. The HOA had long owed taxes on road maintenance, and now I was using it against them. From that moment on, any association vehicle that was illegally parked on my land could be confiscated, including the tractors. She understood. I saw the panic in her eyes, the way she held the papers against her chest, as if they were invisible shields. "You can't." I took a step closer, looking directly at her. "I can. I will." It was at that moment that she finally realized how big a mistake she had made. She thought she could surround me, but in reality, she had set herself up. The tractors she had used to block my entrance, they were now illegal obstructions on county land. And the HOA, which had previously reigned unchallenged, now it was about to collapse completely. This woman had spent her entire life bossing others around. Now she was about to know what it was like to be powerless. The woman was still standing there, her face now rigid, her eyes restless, as if she were trying to calculate a way out of the hole she had dug herself into. But it was too late. She had wanted to trap me. Now she was the one who was trapped. My cell phone vibrated in my pocket, and I knew what it was. I picked it up and quickly read the message. As expected, my application had been approved. The tractors were officially classified as an illegal obstruction on county land. This meant that, from that moment on, any public official had the authority to remove them. I took a deep breath and faced the woman. "Well, I think we have a problem now." She pressed her lips together, her hands trembling slightly at her sides. "This can't be right," she muttered, almost to herself. "Oh, but it is," I replied, giving her a satisfied smile. "And you'll realize it when the squeaks come." Just as I finished the sentence, the sound of heavy engines echoed along the road. The municipal trucks were arriving, and with them, the police. The vehicles parked next to the tractors, and 2 policemen got out. One of them was the local sheriff, a big, serious man I'd known for years. He looked at me, then at the tractors, and finally at the woman, who was already breaking out in a cold sweat. "What have we got here?" he asked, crossing his arms. Before I could answer, the woman stepped forward, with her trademark tone of false indignation. "This man is trying to intimidate us. These tractors belong to the HOA and have been positioned here to ensure compliance with community rules." The sheriff blinked, slowly, as if trying to understand if she really thought this excuse would stick. Then he turned to me. "Are those tractors on your property?" "Yes," I confirmed. "They're obstructing the entrance to my farm, and my request for their removal has been approved by the county council." He nodded and turned to the woman. "Do you have any documents authorizing the HOA to block private property with heavy equipment?" She swallowed. "Minus we have the authority of the association to impose restrictions on properties that violate our regulations." The sheriff sighed and scratched his chin. "And what exactly did he violate?" She opened her mouth, but couldn't say anything, because there was nothing. She never had any power over my farm. She never had any real authority to impose any fines or restrictions. All she did was try to intimidate me with shoddy bureaucracy and empty threats. But now, she was facing the real law, and the law was not on her side. The sheriff turned to the officers next to him and nodded. "Remove the tractors." It was like a bomb exploded in her head. "What?" She tried to run to stop the workers, but one of the policemen blocked her way. "Ma'am, if you continue obstructing the service, we'll have to escort you to the police station." She froze. Now she knew there was nowhere else to run. The municipal workers climbed onto the tractors and started removing them one by one, making room again at the entrance to my farm. And the woman? The woman could only watch helplessly as her big move fell apart before her eyes. I could have stopped there. I could have just watched, satisfied, as everything she had built fell apart. But no, because this woman tried to rip me from my own land, so I was going to rip her out of her life. When the tractors were finally removed and the entrance was clear again, the sheriff turned to me. "Do you need anything else?" I smiled. "Well, since you asked." And then I handed him the second document I had prepared, a request for a full audit of the HOA. The woman heard that and went as white as paper. "What?" The sheriff took the papers, read them quickly, and raised an eyebrow. "This is serious." "Very serious," I confirmed. "This association has been fining residents without justification, extorting money, and appropriating private property. I think it's time to take a closer look." The sheriff looked at the woman, who was now visibly shaking. "Ma'am, could you accompany us to the police station for clarification?" Desperation finally hit her. "This is absurd. I didn't do anything illegal." The sheriff shook his head. "This isn't an arrest, but we're going to need you to explain a few things." She looked around, as if looking for someone to help her, but the locals who once feared her now just watched with satisfaction. She was alone. I approached her and whispered, low enough for only her to hear, "You tried to get me off my land. Now I'm the one taking you away from your position." She stared at me with hatred, but there was something else in her gaze now, something she had never felt before. Fear. The woman stood there, motionless, as the tractors were removed from the entrance to my farm one by one. The sound of the engines running and the metal creaking echoed across the road. But she said nothing. She just watched in silence, her eyes wide, her hands trembling at her sides. Her game was over, but I wasn't finished yet. Did she want to kick me off my own land? Now she was leaving. The sheriff put the HOA audit papers in a folder and turned to the woman. "Ma'am, if you could accompany us to the police station, we'd like to clarify some information about the administration of the association." Her gaze flicked from side to side, searching for an invisible refuge. She tried to find someone, anyone, who could defend her. But the residents of the neighborhood were just watching, and for the first time in years, no one seemed willing to take her side. The siege closed in. She opened her mouth, trying to formulate some kind of excuse, but all she could manage was to stammer, But, I'm the president of the HOA." The sheriff let out a weary sigh. "That doesn't give you the right to block private property with heavy vehicles, nor does it give you the right to impose fines without legal grounds." The woman clenched her fists, closing her eyes for a moment as if trying to control herself. But I saw the exact moment when she realized she had lost. The sheriff turned to the policemen and nodded. One of them took out a notepad and started filling in a document. "We can take her now, or we can arrange a formal statement for the next few days," said the sheriff. "But one way or another, this investigation is going to happen." The woman swallowed. She knew what that meant. She knew that the HOA was full of irregularities. She knew that as soon as they started digging, they'd find enough dirt to end it all. She blinked several times, took a deep breath, and then did the only thing she had left. "Minus I renounce." Silence filled the road. The villagers watching the spectacle exchanged glances. Some whispered among themselves. The sheriff raised an eyebrow. "What did you say?" The woman took another deep breath, closed her eyes for a second, and when she opened them, her expression was no longer one of arrogance. It was one of surrender. "I resign as president of the HOA." The words came out heavy, as if they were suffocating her. And then, as if a spell had been broken, the whole neighborhood started clapping. She squeezed her eyes shut, mortified, but there was no way out. Now she was defeated. The HOA didn't survive for long after that. With the woman's resignation and the audit uncovering all the fraud and abuse, the association was officially dissolved in less than a month. Residents, who had previously been forced to follow arbitrary rules and pay absurd fees, could now live in peace. No ridiculous fines, no idiotic regulations, without a dictator in charge. And what about the woman? Well, she had to sell the house. The lawsuits that arose after the audit were heavy. The HOA owed money to half the world, and as former president, she was held directly responsible. Within weeks, a for sale sign was put up in the garden of her house. This time, there were no sycophants around. There were no more goons handing out fines or neighbors pretending to respect her. Now, she was alone. The morning the removal truck appeared in front of her house, it was like a public event. Some people came out to watch. Others brought chairs. I myself grabbed a coffee and went out onto the balcony, watching the glorious scene from afar. She hurriedly carried boxes to her car, not looking at anyone, trying to ignore the discreet smiles of the neighbors she had once tried to control. Before she got into the car, she saw me. For a second, our gazes met. She didn't say anything, but I saw in her eyes that, for the first time, she understood what it was like to be powerless. And then, without saying a word, she got into the car and disappeared. Now, without the HOA, the neighborhood was back to normal. People could finally do what they wanted with their own homes. There were no more fines for grass too tall, no more absurd rules about fence colors. My farm? It went on exactly as it always had, only now, without anyone trying to boss me around. Because if this story has taught anyone anything, it's that trying to get me off my land has only one outcome. The person is the one who ends up being expelled. And if you liked this video, don't forget to leave a comment and a like.